Hello friends, hope you're all doing well. Today we'll start with a follow-up on what SpaceX did at Starbase last week and recently to come closer to the first orbital launch attempt. In our last update, we've shared with you that SpaceX teams are gearing up for the full-stack wet dress rehearsal of their latest participants, B7 and S-24, to prepare them for the orbital flight test. And this test becomes very much plausible because checking out the system before full static fire will help to avoid any mishap. And that time SpaceX has rolled out B7 to the orbital launch site and was awaiting installation on the orbital launch mount. Ship 24 was also removed from the test stand that indicated an upcoming full stack. As per reports, SpaceX carried out some necessary procedures throughout the week. First, on the 9th of January at nearly 3:50 p.m. Central Standard Time, they again carried out the full stack of the Starship rocket. As per reports, this stack was for the third time in the last 3 months, as well as the first ever in 2023. This further confirmed that SpaceX will head for wet dress rehearsal first. SpaceX had then tweeted, "Ship 24 stacked on Super Heavy Booster 7 at Starbase in Texas." On the 12th of January 2023, SpaceX tweeted that it was moving ahead with a final series of tests of its Starship vehicle and Super Heavy booster at their Starbase test site. They wrote, "Teams are stepping into a series of tests prior to Starship's first flight test in weeks ahead, including full-stack wet dress rehearsals and hold-down firing of Booster 7's 33 Raptor engines." While this was happening with S-24 and B7, Booster 9 had headed back to Mega Bay for the installation of avionics, Raptor engines, and other essential equipment needed for a booster. Then, on the 13th of January 2023, the SpaceX teams had headed for the fueling test of the full-stacked rocket. As per reports, at nearly 11:46 a.m. Central Standard Time, SpaceX started the propellant load testing of the full-stacked rocket. Though it was a partial fuel test, the test lasted for more than 2 hours. While tests have been going on S-24 and B7, SpaceX is also focusing on preparing their successors. According to some reports, Ship 25 was also rolled out by SpaceX teams on the same day from high bay to start its test campaign. Now only full dress rehearsal is left to be done to head for the 33-engine static fire test. Upon clearing the static fire successfully, Starship will be technically clear to go for launch. Musk has plans to launch it by late February or early March, but it may happen that SpaceX misses the projected time as it happened earlier in 2022. But we still hope for the best. Other than technical readiness, SpaceX also needs a launch license from the Federal Aviation Administration for an orbital Starship launch. Back in June 2022, the FAA had completed an environmental review that allowed Starship orbital launches to proceed from Boca Chica. However, it also requires the company to implement more than 75 measures to mitigate environmental effects that is now taking the time. Till now, neither SpaceX nor the FAA have provided updates on the progress of implementing those mitigations or the status of a Starship launch license. The regulatory agency, however, confirmed that SpaceX will not need to fulfill all the measures before getting a launch license. NASA is closely following the progress of Starship as they've already taken Starship for Artemis missions. The agency stated, "The timeframe for SpaceX to implement the more than 75 FAA-required environmental mitigations for its Starship Super Heavy program varies. For example, some measures must be completed prior to launch, while others are designed to occur during post-launch activities or following a mishap event. The FAA will ensure SpaceX complies with all required mitigations." In our next update, we'll talk about SpaceX's first Falcon Heavy mission of 2023. Recently, SpaceX has carried out the USS F-67 mission aboard the Falcon Heavy rocket. As per reports, on the 15th of January at 5:56 p.m. Eastern Time, the Falcon Heavy, along with the payload, was launched to the geostationary orbit from the Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center, Florida. This launch also marked the 5th overall launch of the Falcon Heavy rocket, as well as the second national security space mission after USS F-44, which was carried out in November of 2022. Report says that SpaceX used the same side boosters for the USSF-67 mission that was used earlier in the USSF-44 mission. And with that booster, B-1064 and B-1065 had set their turnaround record of 75 days. Nearly 2.5 minutes after liftoff, side boosters were separated and the core boosters continued its journey as SpaceX had expended it for the mission. After separation, the side boosters changed direction with the help of thrusters and then ignited 3 of their 9 Merlin 1D engines to boost back to the Florida coast. Then they completed short re-entry burns to decrease their speed and finally fired up one time before touching down at Landing Zone 1 and 2 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, almost 8.5 minutes after liftoff. Direct launches to geosynchronous orbit are exceptionally challenging for any rocket, as Falcon Heavy had to launch USSF-67 directly to a geosynchronous orbit. Therefore, the core booster was expended to reach the required orbit. Core booster sacrificed itself just to ensure that the Falcon upper stage is traveling fast enough and has enough propellant to spare when it separates. The upper stage then has carried out at least 3 or 4 burns. The first burn put the USSF-67 payload into a parking orbit around 300 kilometers above Earth's surface. Then, after the second burn, it lifted the pair into a geosynchronous transfer orbit (GTO), with the low end still around 300 kilometers, but the high end around 35,800 kilometers. Report says that the expendable center core was dumped in the Atlantic Ocean and was not recovered as the mission's performance requirements did not allow enough fuel to return the stage back to Earth. As this was a national security mission, therefore SpaceX had ended the live webcast after side booster landings and did not show views of the second stage or the payload. Almost 6 hours after launch, Space Systems Command confirmed the mission success. Major General Stephen Purdy, Program Executive Officer for Assured Access to Space, said, "We had another fantastic launch today on a Falcon Heavy." The Space Force didn't specify much about the payloads that were part of the USSF-67 mission. According to some reports, only 2 major payloads come to the forefront. One of them is a geostationary communications relay satellite called CBAS-2, and sources state that the satellite is developed by Boeing. The second spacecraft was the Long Duration Propulsive ESPA, or LDPE-3A, made by Northrop Grumman. This satellite bus carried 5 small military payloads to orbit. Out of the 5, 2 are small sats of Space Systems, called Catcher and Wasat. The other 3 small sats were developed by the Space Rapid Capabilities Office, or Space RCO. As Falcon Heavy had lifted off its sunset, therefore the rocket plumes created a spectacular contrast between twilight and the bright rocket exhaust. Musk had himself posted a snap of that scene in his Twitter page with the caption, "Falcon Heavy ascends." Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this. Hit the like button if you find the video interesting, and kindly provide your valuable feedback in the comment section. This will help us to improve.